For the first time in quite a while, Missouri doesn't have to worry about the quarterback position for the upcoming season. But 2025, well, that's a whole different story. Let's talk about the future and more right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, the wearer of many hats over the years at the Columbia Missourian, the Tribune, and now your host at the Locked On Mizzou podcast. Thanks for joining me here today on the program. I'm going to tell you about my source over at Spring Football who's telling me that the Missouri defensive line is going to be a nightmare this season, and might Eli Drinkwitz for once actually take a committee approach at the running back position. But I do want to start off today talking actually a little bit further into the future, the 2025 quarterback position, because at the moment that is a genuine worry, even though, hey, we're all focused on 2024 right now, what should be an excellent top-tier Missouri offense led by Brady Cook. But when it comes to 2025, the future of the position, well, you're looking at a lot of unknowns. First of all, the obvious unknown is Sam Horn. Will he be ready in 2024? I think that's a big assumption. It really is. Now, it is an assumption that I would bet on because obviously these days, more often than not, guys come back from Tommy John surgery and are just fine, even at the baseball pitching level, which puts a lot more stress on the elbow typically than an NFL or a college or NFL quarterback's that type of throwing motion does. It's just night and day, quite honestly. So then the other question is, how about Aiden Glover, the true freshman? Will he be ready in any way, shape, or form by 2025? But of course, the newest addition to the Missouri roster, well, he's a really interesting case as well. Drew Pine, the former Notre Dame quarterback. Well, I just mentioned I have some sources at spring practice. Apparently, I just have little birdies all over the place because, again, it's a little bit of hearsay here, some secondhand information. But according to somebody I talked to directly who knows players on the Notre Dame roster, evidently Drew Pine was a really well-liked guy on that team. Never a problem, a good student by all accounts. So to some of these players, it was kind of confusing why he was seemingly forced out by Notre Dame. I don't have any great answers or even speculation to that question. But I will say, at the quarterback position, being injury prone is worrisome. And I don't want to tag Pine with that label just yet. But coming off of definitely an injury-riddled 2023, you definitely would like to see him get healthy. Hopefully, the problem is that question is not going to be answered in 2024 unless, something bad happens with Brady Cook. And obviously we're all praying that that absolutely does not happen. So the point is, I think when you step back, take a bigger picture look of this whole situation, you've got a guy in Pine who had a nice 2022 for Notre Dame, which makes you question, why was Notre Dame seemingly ready to move on from that young man? And again, the Horn questions, not only his health, but can he actually play college football at this level? None of that has been proven yet either. And obviously Aiden Glover, a really inexperienced guy, developmental prospect by all accounts. So what that tells me is that in 2025, I'd say for the fourth consecutive year here, at least the third consecutive year, Missouri will be looking for a quarterback in the transfer portal. But this time, unlike this round where Missouri ended up with Drew Pine, I think you could see the Tigers being a legitimate contender for a real starter, a guy who maybe wants to move up a level, something like that. Tigers could be a real interesting landing spot for a portal quarterback in 2025. And speaking of the future, 2025, and, well, really the Notre Dame Fighting Irish as well, there's a young man named Jack Lang. And yes, it is Jack Lang. That's really the point of this. But Jack Lang from Eureka, Missouri, 2025 class, Notre Dame, Michigan, Ole Miss, Wisconsin, and yes, of course, the Missouri Tigers are after this young man. So he's a real talent at offensive tackle. Brought him up before. The reason I'm bringing him up again is because a couple times I've said, hey, his name is spelled Lange. I think it's Lang, but then I heard my colleague Brian Smith say Lange. And then I had a commenter named Jason very confidently say that it was Lange. So I just had to, okay, let's put this to bed, just like I do with the Brady Cook eligibility thing. Let's just go straight to the horse's mouth. I asked Jack Lang how you pronounce his name, and yes, it is indeed Lang. So mystery solved there. We can all sleep tonight. Now, I have a Mizzou football source out there that I trust a lot, and this person has a relationship with a Missouri assistant coach. And as you know, what an assistant coach or any coach is going to tell the media in a press conference is quite a bit different. They're going to be more unguarded when they're off of the record. So right now, everything that I'm about to tell you, as I just said, it's secondhand information. It's hearsay. So it would not be admissible in court, folks. But you know what? You want to hear it anyway. Be honest. You know that you do. So here's the report back so far from spring football. Of course, Missouri ending with the black and gold game on Saturday. But according to this coach absolutely loves the physicality so far this spring. Basically, it's carried over from what you saw in the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State, especially up front on both sides of the football. And in particular, there are more question marks along the defensive line, at least on paper, but this coach says that this front four is going to be a, quote, nightmare for opposing offensive lines. He thinks the Tigers have depth along the front four, and they're going to use it. 6 to 8 guys that can contribute, perhaps, and it's going to be hard to run on Missouri once again. That's how this coach feels. And by the way, one interesting observation here, all the fights that are happening, the occasional skirmishes on practice, apparently 100% of them have been between the offensive and defensive line. So just I'm choosing to take that as a positive. Obviously, you got to remember, hey, guys, we all wear the same jersey here at the end of the day. But if it's all in the spirit of good physicality and competition up front, hey, you kind of like to have a little dog up front, no question. So I love to see it. And Missouri starting to really grow a reputation as being a very physical school up front. And finally, I'm hearing really good reports back about Toriano Pride so far in this spring football period. Of course, Pride, the Clemson transfer, playing corner for the Tigers this spring and this fall as well. Expected to be a starter along with Drayden Norwood. And those two have some really big shoes to fill there. Ennis Rakestraw, perhaps a first-round pick coming up. Chris Abrams-Drain could be a first couple-day pick as well. Both guys really, really productive in college. In fact, Abrams-Drain even more productive, most would argue, but Rakestraw with a tremendous amount of talent as well. To me, just those two guys out there at the same time, that was a big part of why the Missouri defense was really good last season. However, I will say those last 2 or 3 ball games without Rakestraw, Drayden Norwood seemed to plug in and play just fine. So that's a good sign for Missouri moving forward. And certainly Norwood got a lot of experience as the third corner last season as well. And when it comes to worries and concerns for 2024, it's a little bit odd, right, that the 6th leading vote getter for the Heisman Trophy this past season, Cody Schrader, has not really been at the top of anyone's list, including mine. Well, are we making a huge mistake here? And what is the best way for Missouri to try to replicate Cody Schrader's production? Let's talk about that coming up here in just a little bit. But first, passion drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, and LED headlights, whether you're into power, speed, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. And thanks for telling a fellow true son or daughter about this podcast. You can, of course, find us wherever you get podcasts, including on the SiriusXM app, where you can listen to the Tigers take on Georgia tonight in the SEC tournament, or check it out on channel 190 on your radio dial as well. But I'll tell you this, it is interesting how little people seem to be worried about Cody Schrader being gone. And a part of that is the devaluing of the running back position over the years, especially at the NFL level. I think that mentality has definitely crept down into college football fans a little bit. I will say this, I definitely think the lower you go down in football, each level, the running back can make a bigger and bigger impact. But the thing is, with Cody Schrader, one of the reasons he was such a good player the last couple seasons is because of his incredible durability. So to count on these new guys, whether it's Marcus Carroll, whether it's the Noel kid, whether it's Kawan Lacey, the true freshman, or Jamal Roberts, anybody who's on the roster already, you know, on paper, a running back by committee approach, maybe splitting the carries between two guys more or less, maybe that would make some sense, or at the very least having a designated type third down running back, because I think that's one of the biggest hidden values that Cody Schrader can bring to the NFL is you never have to take him off of the field. So essentially you're never tipping what kind of play you're going to run either. That's a really valuable thing that most people don't notice or think about very often. But here's the thing. While a committee approach may make a lot of sense, especially when Noel, the transfer from, I believe, App State off the top of my head, he was more of an outside zone type player, which Missouri ran a lot last season. Whereas Marcus Carroll, he was more of a hit the A gap and go when you watched him play for Georgia State last year. So my point is, perhaps those two guys do have some skill sets that are complementary. Maybe they have different strengths and weaknesses. But while that may make sense on paper, I'm just going to tell you right now that I would bet a lot of money that that does not happen, because so far during his coaching career, Eli Drinkwitz is a one running back guy. Especially once you get past September or so, you get into October football, Eli Drinkwitz is going to find one guy and give him the ball. We saw this really the last two seasons when in September, Nate Pete was a significant part of the rotation, only to be completely phased out by the end of the season. You saw it the previous couple seasons as well. Drinkwitz's first year with the Tigers, Larry Roundtree was your bell cow. Despite having Tyler Beatty on that roster, well, then the next season, hey, it was Tyler Beatty once again. So Missouri's also had a really fortunate run here, I would say, of having good running backs, number one, but number two, not really having any injury problems at that position as well. Hopefully we can keep those particular streaks going this season. I'll just say this, with a bunch of different talent on the roster this season, I think it would be interesting if Missouri did a little bit more by committee, but once again, at the risk of being repetitive, I don't think there's any there's any way that the smart money would be on that thing. I bet Drinkwitz picks one running back and goes with him by October once again. And I spent a good chunk of yesterday's program talking about Brady Cook and his potential NFL future, reminding people that, yes, Brady Cook can be a backup and still have an NFL future. He doesn't have to be one of the best 32 quarterbacks in the world to make a heck of a lot of money in this sport. And to that point, well, Drew Lock seems to be on his way to making a little bit more money this season as well, reportedly going to sign with the New York Giants as Daniel Jones' primary backup. Now, of all the places, though, for Drew Lock to have landed, this is about as good of a spot as he could have hoped for a place where he could potentially get some time as a starter, with Jones coming off an ACL reconstruction. And by the way, a second year into his contract extension that he signed in the previous offseason. Gets easier and easier with the passing of time for the Giants to move on from Daniel Jones. However, New York does have the 6th overall pick in the draft. They could easily take a quarterback in that spot, like J.J. McCarthy perhaps, or somebody like that. Perhaps, the Washington quarterback, Michael Penix, perhaps they could take him 6th or package some picks and move up to 3rd and take Drake May or Jaden Daniels, something like that. So it's not as though this is an obvious, Lock's going to be your starter. I'm just saying, of all the potential places he could have landed in the league, that's a pretty soft one in terms of, hey, he could be the starter one day in 2024 when we look up. And almost certainly and mercifully, either tonight or potentially tomorrow, let's say, the Missouri basketball season is going to end. And thank goodness for that. But I will say this, if Missouri beats Georgia tonight, does that actually matter? Well, it would matter for me from a pride perspective, I suppose. At least when people threw the 0-18 in my face, I could go, well, technically we did win one SEC game, so we would have that going for us. On the other hand, as for the future of Missouri, does it actually matter if we win tonight or even tomorrow against Florida? Good luck, right? I don't see that happening. But I just don't think it really matters one way or the other. I think this season, for all intents and purposes, is all over. And really about the only thing I'm going to be watching for tonight is Aiden Shaw's usage for the Tigers, because if he gets really sparing minutes tonight, like say 10 minutes or fewer, I got to think he's probably on his way out of the Missouri program. That's just how I'm seeing it. And amazingly, while it's been basically 30 years since Missouri has won a conference title in the regular season in basketball, and 55 years since they've won one in football, believe it or not, this was the first time a certain Missouri program did not win a conference title in 14 seasons this season. So let's talk about that impressive feat here coming up in just a little bit. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win the whole thing. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Locked On has launched the first ever sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. And it was ultimately somewhat of a disappointing season for Missouri wrestling this year. And my goodness, if only Missouri football and especially Mizzou basketball could call that a disappointing season, we'd be loving life, I think, because this was the first time Mizzou wrestling did not win a conference title in 14 seasons. And that includes stints in the MAC, and the Big 12, by the way, not the SEC. No SEC other wrestling programs. By the way, I think some people misunderstood my point that I was trying to make about Missouri baseball the other day. It's not that I don't think Missouri shouldn't have a baseball team. Missouri should have a baseball team. I just think the more you look at it, the idea that Missouri is going to compete with LSU and Ole Miss and Florida and Texas in baseball, frankly, the sport just has never meant anything at Missouri, at least not in my lifetime. If you want to go back to when Norm Stewart was on the mound and the Tigers won the national title in the 1950s, you want to go back, you want to go back to the Eisenhower administration and say it mattered then, fine and dandy. The whole world has changed a heck of a lot since then, especially the sports world and the amount of options for your entertainment. It's just not comparable. And again, in my lifetime, which is not a short period of time at this point, we got a pretty good sample size of 40 plus years now. Missouri baseball has just never mattered here. It just hasn't. And the only fans you really have to draw upon are essentially in Boone County and maybe outside of Jeff City too, because nobody's coming from St. Louis or Kansas City or any of these other places to watch Missouri baseball. It's just never going to happen. Why is LSU baseball so much more meaningful in Baton Rouge than it is here? I'm not sure. I'm sure there's a dozen different reasons for that, but I'm just telling you, there is zero proof that Missouri's ever going to compete in the SEC. So my thing is basically just make it a club sport. Go to the Big 8 or something. Go to the MAC and play baseball. I don't really care. I just think the idea of throwing good money after bad to try to compete against LSU and Mississippi State, I'm sorry, it's just never going to happen. It's not realistic. It's like, some third club in Manchester trying to compete with City and United in soccer. It's just never going to happen, folks. So that was the only point I was trying to make there. If you want to disagree with that point, go ahead and disagree with me. But I just wanted to make sure that my point was at least clear there. And when it comes to Missouri wrestling, by the way, my goodness, that's kind of my point. A really good program that went and competed in the MAC and was still one of the elite programs in the country. They never won the national title, but they had individuals who won national championships, including Keegan O'Toole during these periods. So to me, I think the Mizzou wrestling program is actually a great example of how the non-revenue sports can still compete and succeed even without being in the SEC. That's my main point. I'm not trying to close down any sports or denigrate any sports, but just this idea that we all need to be in the SEC just because football is, we need to get past that concept. And finally, I did see something, speaking of Mizzou wrestling, Zach Elam, speaking of streaks here, he said on his X feed, again, Mizzou wrestler Zach Elam, he said, I took third in all 5 conference tournaments I wrestled in during my college career. Some say that's more impressive than first 5 times. Hashtag grit, hashtag no one says that. So I enjoyed the self-deprecating humor there from Zach Elam. And quite honestly, I had never heard of young Mr. Elam before this. So it's good to know that, hey, I had missed out on a guy who's obviously a heck of a wrestler at Missouri. But to me, it just shows that it's more than just about the sports themselves. When you fall in love with the personalities, if Missouri can find a way to market the personalities a little bit better, make me care about the people on the field, whether it is in basketball or football or wrestling or baseball or whatever it might be, you make me care about the person, suddenly I'm going to start caring about the sport. I think sometimes we as sports fans can get that a little bit backwards. But anyway, thanks as always for caring about this program. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. And until next time, I am John Miller, and this has been Locked on Mizzou.